Hey, there we go. Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey, coming at you with another great guest today. And we're just starting off the new year with a hot bunch of guests here, um, including Chris Ferrone from the Talking Joints memo. I don't know if you guys saw that, but that was a phenomenal interview. Paula Collins from the law office of Paula Collins. Great stuff about the state of New York. And we got more coming on that tonight. Summer Westerber from the Kairos Insurance Group, Mark Sheldone from the Better Chem Consulting. And we've got a bunch of great stuff coming up for you. I want to do a couple. I also want to shout out Rodney Leinhart and Eric McEdward for putting together that intro video for me, as well as my sponsors, Damien and Bailey from Higher Elevation here in Morrisville, Vermont. Check out the store, higherelevation.com, 65 Northgate Plaza, Suite 6 in Morrisville, 802-200-2937. And I want to thank you guys again for your support. And I love these hoodies. They're so soft. So coming up, I just want to announce a couple things we got coming up on Sunday. I've got Nancy Wallace, who's a grower from Oklahoma. I'm super excited to have Nancy on. She saw my last interview with Ron Durbin, who's the lawyer I met from Oklahoma out in Vegas last year. And Ron will be coming back on the show on Tuesday. And that's always a good time talking to Ron. On Thursday, the 18th, I've got Charles McGowan from Sambo Creek Filtration. They make hash washing gear. So that should be super fun. Saturday, I've got another interview with Rob Skure, who just dropped a new album. And then Sunday, the 21st, I've got Larissa Bolivar coming back. And that's always a heater, talking to Larissa. Anyway, for my guest tonight, this is going to be a good one. And I've been looking for people in New York to talk to who are familiar with the market over there, because I've been following some of the proceedings. And you guys might have seen my interview with Brad Racino or Paula Collins, who filled us in on some of what's going on over there. And I've been looking for some people that are actively involved in the market. As you know, Brad's a journalist, Paul's a lawyer, so they're not really business owners in that sense. And tonight we got one of those right here. And without further ado, shameless slap from Grateful Valley Farm, as well as the, what's it called? Cannabis Farmers Alliance?
Yep.
Yeah, it's Joseph Calderone. Joseph, thank you for being here tonight, man.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. And before here, I'm gonna throw you in the big box. I need to know how to do that off the default. But before we get into anything serious, and I'm gonna solo on you for a minute here, would you give us a 5-minute life story?
Wow, yeah, great question. So I guess I'm gonna work backwards, because that's probably the best way to go. So I came to cannabis through a mentor and colleague, and we actually worked together in the IT industry. We met out in Boulder, Colorado years ago. Prior to that, I got my MBA in finance and in design from a school in Milan, Italy. In between that, I worked in some startups and some branding agencies. I was born in Hawaii, raised in New York. I went away to school in Rhode Island, and then in Washington, D.C. I worked abroad. I've worn many different hats, from advertising to IT to branding, and then and finally to the cannabis industry. I studied all different kinds of subject areas: history, government, linguistics, psycholinguistics, multiple languages, Sanskrit, Latin, Greek, French. Always been kind of like someone who likes to get into, no pun intended, into the weeds and into the details of many different things. I would describe myself as someone who's pretty wide, relatively deep, but also shallow. Just kind of that weird kind of ADHD of multiple interests in many different areas. That's why I think when I came to cannabis, it was very attractive to me, especially from the ethnobotanical aspect of it. What is this plant doing for us, and what are we doing for this plant? And historically, and how is it related to the lives of other plants, right? And Why does it exist? How does it exist? Who does it exist for? And uh, bef- one of my one of the most important, I think, projects that really kind of set me up for the cannabis industry was um, number one, my mentor out in Colorado, Skip Metter with Mark Caha and Monarch. Um, they do some really incredible infused products with some incredible innovations. And I started out with him back in 2012, and he kind of mentored me into this industry. And then also my work with Village Earth and with participatory practices and sustainable development with indigenous groups down in the Amazon. And that sort of taught me a process of activism, which was a grassroots form of activism, and which I've applied to different objectives in my life, like political campaigns. But it was interesting working with groups that were displaced and that were seemingly displaced, that were seemingly in need of resources, that were isolated. The Amazon's a pretty, especially where I was in Yazuni National Park, working with like really with remote indigenous groups in extremely remote areas that were constantly at risk of from being overrun by mineral extractors or loggers. And it was the kind of work that I did was kind of magical in a way. And I was taught by someone who named David Bartecki, who was the former executive director. He died like a couple months ago in a and so a shout out to him and to his family on the Rogue River out in Oregon. And I learned everything about locating basically locating resources in these communities that seemingly had none, and understanding that you don't necessarily need money, top down money, which can be wasteful and also can also it can also um, be very damaging actually when it comes to activism. And usually when you find your resources from the grassroots up and from within and from your own community, and and you you and when you uh try to I'm losing my train of thought anyway. So when you try to be um why don't we switch gears here, because I'm blocking out. I'm a little bit
Yeah.
tired. Yeah, yeah. So
It's okay. That was a good 5 minutes, Joseph,
yeah.
and, I'm gonna dig into some of the stuff. If you were working backwards, if you don't mind, I'd like to work forward a little bit and ask you a little bit about, your work in finance, because I believe something you mentioned to me on the phone is that you didn't understand as much as you thought about the finance world when you got into it, and you
Mhm.
wanted to understand more about how money works, and that's certainly something that I've been diving into because 'cause I've never had money, and I certainly like to know how it works, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so I when I was living in New York City, I was working. It was during the Silicon Alley days and the Web 2.1.0 days, sort of at the tail end of that before the big crash. And I was working in a flash media branding agency called Ego Media, which I think is a funny name. But I lost my job. 9/11 happened, and so I went through that. And and then I found myself with a freelance job on Wall Street in um, a financial services business that was digital, one of the first digitally based one. And I was fired because I didn't have an understanding of finance. I didn't understand the statistics. I didn't understand the business, different business models. And that I had sort of a general interest in it beforehand. I was like, fascinated by markets, and actually I was fascinated by money and where it comes from. But then after that, I just kind of dove in personally into reading books by Warren Buffett and by Benjamin Graham, and reading the Financial Times every single day. And that gave me an incredible understanding uh, of the way, really, the how globalization was spreading across the U.S., and how um, money was moving markets, who had access to them, how banks lend to one another, what bonds mean, what credit default swaps mean. Um, and That led me to go to business school and to focus on finance. But what I realized is that business school didn't tell the whole story. And so what I started getting into was central banks and how central banks control money, how they basically print money, um, how they create boom and bust cycles, how they create incredible disparities in wealth between um, the top, let's say they used to call, yeah, the top 1% and the rest of the 99%, and how with each economic cycle, it seems that the people that are at the top or are closest to the trough end up gaining more, while the people at the bottom are scrambling for whatever is left. And I think that's true globally. And I think that we are sort of at a tipping point in our history where, and I think that cannabis is sort of a microeconomy and is a microcosm of that sort of larger uh, context that we're looking at financially. And so, yeah, I've been able to sort of apply that and apply my knowledge from my MBA and to model statistics and at least look at it, especially in our own market, in our New York market, and look at the incredible disparities and how quick the destruction is for certain stakeholders in this industry.
And you're breaking up a little here. I'm going to keep you posted if that keeps going. We got a couple seconds of delay there, but
Okay.
overall, this sounds pretty good. I'm going to keep going as long as it's not super bad. But this was another note I believe that I took from you on the phone is about the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics and sort of um, the competition between small businesses and these massive corporations that they're up against in these markets. And especially now, the way money can move across the globe with the click of a mouse button, it seems like even just a bigger advantage, in my opinion, to the larger corporations that have capital to send around the world. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that idea.
Well, yeah. Also, I mean, ultimately, what is Wall Street? Wall Street is kind of a clearinghouse for internet or for international financial organizations. It's one of many around the world, and so it's they Wall Street is it it takes over industries, in the before they even happen. So that's why it's very difficult for small to medium sized enterprises to compete. Um, I mean, I'm just going to use it in the most recent contest with the cannabis industry. I mean, it's the weight that MSOs and ROs have um, on regulations um, and how they've shaped this market is absolutely incredible. I mean, it's the largest, and it makes sense because New York is the largest cannabis market in the world, and it's projected to be anywhere from 10 to 17 billion dollars in the future, depending on how things go. And but for some reason, after only 1 year, it's only made 140 million dollars. And of that 140 million dollars, 92, just about, well, 95% of it has gone to the larger operators, so the AUCC and AUCPs, that amounts to about probably no more than 10 organizations, and that's excluding the ROs. That's the ROs, they made $1.1 billion last year. I'm talking about the new
Will you
operators that,
tell us?
yeah.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. Could you tell us what those acronyms stand for, please, before you carry on? For people that might be listening that don't know what RO, AUCC, and whatever the other
All
one
right.
was, you said.
Yeah, so RO is a registered organization, and the ROs were the medical um, cannabis groups that entered the state. I believe it was like in 2018, or maybe it was. anyway, it was like 2017, 2018. I could be off by a year. And they spent millions and millions of dollars in order to enter the medical market when medical became legal in New York State. And they're called registered organizations. I just call them multi-state operators in New York State.
And was this like your Curaleafs and True Leaf and those kind of big companies?
Acreage, I mean, they had different names, they're your pharmacans, they're your Etanes, yeah, but yes, Curaleaf, Vireo Health, Acreage, MedMen, and most of them had different names, but these multi-state operators came in and bought controlling shares or the companies outright in New York State when they had the opportunity. And they sort of rode the medical thing until the adult use market opened up. And AUCC is an adult use uh, um, conditional cultivator. So it's the grower in New York State. An AUCP is an adult use conditional processor.
Uh,
Um, and a card is um, why can't I remember that?
Conditional adult use retail dispensary.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And then so it's a two-tier market. You have the AUCCs and the AUCPs, so the growers and the processors on one side, one tier, and on the other tier you have the retail side, which right now comprises the cards, which are defined as, justice involved people primarily at this point, but that's also been opened up to other social equity applicants like um distressed women, veterans, and we could get into all that in a little bit, but so it's a two-tiered system in New York State, which is a little bit different than other states.
Well, and there was this big lawsuit, I believe, with the veterans, right, involving the social equity license. There's some injunction issued. I don't know if I'm remembering that right, but I remember Brad Racino writing something about this.
Yeah, Brad covered it very well, actually. There have been multiple lawsuits um, that have um, that have been directed at the Office of Cannabis Management of New York, our regulatory body. The Office of Cannabis Management has lost every one of those lawsuits, and most of them yeah, have dealt with the fairness of the quote unquote fairness of the way the retail portion of the program has been unfolded, whether it's on the uh what's called the dormant um commerce clause. um and that was what Vericite, the the lawsuit which blocked many regions in New York State to open up retail dispensaries. And then also on the card program itself, and whether or not that was legal to exclude certain, because that was mostly just it was all justice involved people, and there were other groups that were codified into law like veterans who felt excluded, and it- rightly so. I mean, the state lost the lawsuit, so that harmed a lot of the industry, and it actually helped the ROs gain more traction. And actually, the ROs were kind of behind that. They helped fund that veterans lawsuit against. So there were two main lawsuits really that harmed the program and slowed it down. That was the Vericite lawsuit for the dormant commerce clause, and it was the um, uh, um, Fiore et al. Lawsuit, which was the veterans lawsuit against the OCM.
Huh. Okay. Wow. Interesting twist there. So it's like they won the lawsuit, but it still gave the big corporations maybe a little extra time to get a foothold in the industry. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, and it also really harmed the retail side because they weren't able to open. And of course, most of those retailers were down in New York City, in the New York City area, and everything's extremely expensive there. So look, trying to find locations, trying to get your security up and running after you get your license, You have to pay rent, right? People sunk all of their life savings into it. So on the retail side, on the farming side, the farmers, um, 100% of the farmers and the cultivators market was realized, and they only had 8% of the retail market in order to distribute and sell their products.
And it sounds like I also did rip through all the stuff you emailed me earlier, and let's circle back to that later. But I want to ask you about, and I want to do a shameless slap here. I'm supposed to do this every like 15 minutes. I'm with Joseph Calderone, Grateful Valley Farm. I'd like to ask you about Grateful Valley Farm. You're the first person involved in a cultivation. Well, I've talked to a couple others, but you're the first one I've got on the show. Oh no,
Sorry about that.
who is it? Is it Paula Collins? Yeah.
I'm obviously very inept when it comes to turning this stuff off. You got any tips for me?
No, I'm not the tech guy. I barely
All right.
can run my own show. I had to cancel an interview last week because the fucking sound cut out on me. So don't ask me. Um,
All right. So
but
if someone calls again, I'll just have to reject them. I apologize to your listeners.
no,
And
unless
I
it's a
also
good, unless it's
apologize for all the scattered stuff going on. I'm doing my best. So
no, don't worry. My notes are scattered, so that's okay. And we're kind of bouncing back and forth, but that's all right. This is going to be good. But I'd like to hear from you because, here, we're going to do it again. Grateful Valley Farm. And I know I talked to Paula and Brad about this, but you're the first business owner that's come on the show. And I'd like to ask all the business owners about the regulatory framework in your state and what it's like, the trials and tribulations of trying to start a business in New York.
I'd like to just give a little background about Grateful Valley Farm and just Grateful Valley Farm. I'm a part equity owner in it and the COO and chief compliance officer of that. We have we have one, two, three, four, five folks that run that farm. Um, we have a biomass operation and a flower operation, and we it Grateful Valley Farm was founded by Tess Interlicia, my partner, and she was a
Oh,
nurse. She was a nurse practitioner. Um,
cool.
she had her own nursing practice, and she probably has given out, or not given out. She's um, uh, signed up probably over 1,000 people for their medical card in New York State. So um, she really comes from a foundation of cannabis as medicine. And so in a little bit, ironically, we're a little bit misplaced because we believe in the cannabis, the sort of medicinal um, relief that cannabis can give in whatever forms, and for the multiple conditions that it can treat. Um, so she thought, what a great way to get into this industry. She and I were both hemp farmers for the hemp pilot program. She grew hemp for the last 2 years. I was doing more research and genetic stuff. I had my hemp processing and growing license. She had some amazing hemp grows, just beautiful plants, and was left like many of our farmers with just hundreds upon hundreds of pounds of biomass. And so her one hope was to be able to be included in the adult use and to be able to transition somehow from hemp farming. And so she got her wish, and was just as excited as everybody else to get one of these conditional licenses. And I joined her to try and get this brand and this this business off the ground. And it's been shaky to say the least, of course.
Hmm. And
But
it's yeah, it
we won
sounds
some awards for our flower at a couple of early events at the Farm Forum event. We won an award for our flower, and we won awards for two different varieties at a um, I forget the event. There's so many different events and things, but back last fall. And then we were able to get on the shelves of one dispensary, and we've been trying to get, and of course it was tough to get stuff on the shelf in the dispensary, and all of our stuff from 2000, all of our products from 2022 started aging out because of the slow rollout. So um, like many other farmers, we were kind of left with a lot of product that we had to uh, to sell for probably less of what it would have been worth if the state had promised to have 20 dispensaries open instead of one, when they had with the promises they had made. So um
Is that what happened? They said we're gonna have 20 dispensaries open, and then there was one.
well, they were said they were going to have 20 per month from December of 20 two moving forward, and they had one at the end of, it was Housing Works, um, which was the first dispensary to open down in New York City, and that opened at the end of 2022 in December, and then a few more sporadically opened up, about 7, 8, or 9 between January and June of last year. There were some dispensaries that were delivery only and were allowed, but then the injunction hit from the lawsuits, and that froze all of the dispensaries from opening up. And now we have about, I think, as of yesterday, 47 that are due to open. So the timeline was there was supposed to be 200 at this point, and so there are 47 as opposed to 200.
Shit, we got more than that in Vermont.
I know. Yeah, well, Missouri has a one over a $1 billion market, and they have, probably what, maybe a third of the population of New York. And Maryland, uh I can't remember how much they have, but they have, like, you know, n Maryland's doing very well as well. I can't remember all the statistics. I could share those with you at some other point, but
Hmm.
the point is, I mean, the numbers don't lie. The OCM, they put out numbers for their successes. They talk about $140 million. They talk about, any, what did Mark Twain say? There's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics, right? It really just depends on how you're going to frame the numbers that you have, and New York State likes to do that. And there's a lot of different things that I say about New York, and then sometimes I say it's just it's a it's a regulatory agency masquerading as a PR firm, you know. And that's and the other thing that I have to say about it, and I know that these are probably harsh words, but it was a um it was a somewhat ignorant body of a regulatory body that was ignorant of cannabis and ignorant of business and ignorant of cannabis business, informed
Huh.
in informed by self-proclaimed consultants and experts that comprised trade organizations, and that were, because of that lack of understanding on the regulatory side and lack of expertise, and because of what I found was the lack of expertise of certain trade organizations, that allowed for these giant sort of gaps of knowledge, which was in part what caused the structural problems aside from the legal issues. And also it had to do with the governor's office. I mean, uh when you have one governor leave, um and have a lieutenant governor take over, what that's going to change also the organizational management of the government. So you had a very controlling sort of top-down governor, Andrew Cuomo, leave, and then you had sort of a weak governor that is controlled by her mostly her this is just me talking, speculatively, but just the way I look at it, controlled more by her agencies as opposed to controlling her agencies. So and I think that all of those weaknesses have allowed all these problems, and I think that they're all interrelated as to why New York is having such a problem.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too, same thing here in Vermont, and I like a couple of the members of the CCB, but they didn't have cannabis experience coming in, and they were appointed by a bunch of other people that didn't have any cannabis experience coming in. When you look at that sort of, it seemed, in my opinion, our governor didn't want legalization at all. Phil Scott's a Republican, and he's kind of a dick, and that's my opinion. But he kicked the can down the road 5 years, and then all these appointments came down with people. And I know hemp farmers who literally wrote the legislation. Word to John Rogers, who applied for a job on the Cannabis Control Board and didn't even get interviewed. And then you see these other people who are getting these appointments from the governor. Uh,
Go ahead.
so that lack of experience to me really is frustrating to see, especially when there are people with actual experience who aren't even getting interviewed for these positions.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but I think one of the things that like Colorado did right, from what I understand, is that they actually listened to some of their legacy operators when they opened up their industry. And I think that's another thing that's also seriously lacking. That, I mean, in retrospect, if someone were to write, a book about, the early years in New York State, the fact that the people that built the culture and that really had most of the tacit knowledge of how to build this industry, and who had most of the clientele, also the people that were like, that risked their lives for decades, risked their families' lives for decades, were quite disregarded and even in some ways disparaged in this industry, and were shunted to the side. Some of those people were absorbed. um, were they the right people? I really don't know. Some of them, yes, but it's clear that that the states, at least New York State, didn't seem to really care or listen that much, and to that part of the business. And I think that that in that way, I mean, the legacy. I don't even like to use legacy. I hate that. It almost the word legacy almost feels like it's dead, and then we're looking at something dead in the past. That's just my own perspective of it. I like just like calling it. I don't even like calling it black market, because that gives it sort of like this negative connotation, right? I actually just calling it like it's a traditional market. These guys were the pioneers, and it's the traditional market, and they helped create this market. And it seems to me that a lot of these states are doing everything they can to co-opt, take, crush, whatever words you want to use, this traditional market. These are the folks that really understood the market. And unfortunately, though, they understand that business from their standpoint, and there's a learning curve as to how to understand how to do business in a regulatory environment. I mean, there should be Harvard Business School studies um, written about the cannabis industry, because I don't, except for the defense industry, I don't know any other industry that has the government so deeply in their back pocket. I mean, the government basically is hold not really holding the hands, but is basically shadowing, you know, every um every program in New York State. And it's a very odd new kind of business model. This sort of it's almost like a public and private partnership, especially on the taxation side in New York State, because when you're talking about the potency tax, um,
Go ahead,
which is
because yeah,
yeah,
do my segues for me, Joseph, because that's in my notes
okay,
here, and I'd love to hear about that. I saw that in the some of the documentation that you emailed me yesterday.
yeah. So just to give you, I'm just gonna pull up something right now to reference. So the potency tax is a tax that's levied by the state based on THC potency. So every percentage point is significant. So if you have anything over 20% on the flower side, it's going to be more expensive. And on the processing side, just to give everybody an idea of what the farmer makes, for every $100 of a we're just talking about vapes here, not flower, okay? But you can kind of extend similar metrics um to vapes and to I mean to flower and to gummies. And actually gummies are the I'll just explain through the numbers. So the um a, out of every $100, the retail dispensary makes $37. The distributor will make $19. The processor share is $19. The New York State retail tax is $13 and the potency tax is $8. Okay, that doesn't seem like much when you're looking at what all the other guys are making, but the farmer's share of all that is $4. So that means that the potency tax, the state actually makes $8. The farmer's share is $4. So what that means is that New York State makes twice as much money as the producers in the market.
Yeah, and I believe so one of my guests, John Rogers, who wrote the legislation, who applied for that job on the CCB, said, the unfortunate thing is that the farmer makes less than anybody else who touches the product. And I feel like that's a sad reality of farming, not just cannabis, but really anything.
Right, and actually, they're not only do they not make anything, but they're the bank for the other stakeholders. They're the bank for the laboratories, they're the bank for the retail, they're the banks for the processors, and they're the banks for the state. And they're the ones that have to wait the longest in order to get paid. So, and that is the sad reality. But it doesn't really have to be that way. Um,
It doesn't. It seems like it doesn't, but it is.
right. It's kind of but that's the reason why the Cannabis Farmers Alliance was born. Cannabis Farmers Alliance was born out of necessity because other trade organizations, um, and around November or December of 2022, Tess and I at Grateful Valley were sitting in on a meeting with another trade organization, and I just couldn't believe my eyes because it ended up being, or my ears, it ended up being a meeting that was dominated by processors, basically saying, "You guys just better get GMP certified," which is thousands of dollars, and it's another onerous sort of regulation because you guys aren't going to be able to process not even process your own flower into flower products or into pre rolls. And I was just like, wait a second here. And I remember I was actually under an alias. It was Joey Calzone. And I ended up sending out a little like missive and I said, um, sounds like sounds like a processor, meeting. It doesn't sound this, and it was supposed to be, for cultivators, right? And so that really struck a chord with some of the people over there, and they got a little bit angry, and there were some expletives, and they told me to fuck off, and and it's, I was like, ooh, I must have pressed a button here, this, and so that led me down the rabbit hole, and I'm like, okay, who's really represent? How can one trade organization represent um, every stakeholder in the industry without there being some clash or without there being somebody left out? So I was like, well, there's a need for someone to represent the farmers and the cultivators, aside from a trade organization that thinks that they're trying to do everything for everyone. And then there were some breakoff groups from those meetings, and then 12 of us met in Lake Geneva in New York State, and we had a meeting around some picnic tables, and people kind of passed around their wonderful flower that was grown mostly outdoor at the time. And then the organization was born. It was based actually off of the idea of what's called the Farmers Holiday. The Farmers Holiday was an organization, I believe it was in the late 19th century, and they were feeling exploited by the cities by the regulations. And so, um, and I'm really not doing it justice, but the farmers' holiday was about farmers taking a holiday from distributing any of their food to the cities. And it actually, some of them were hung, some of these farmers were prosecuted and sent to jail. But what it did is it showed how important farmers were to the supply chain. Okay, we're not, some of us actually are also hemp farmers that want to grow seed for food. It's true. At Grateful Valley Farm, we wanted to use the money that we made from adult use cannabis market to reinvest that into our own research and development into hemp seed to create hemp based foods. That was our medium and long term goal, because we feel, that the 50,000 or so applications of the hemp plant should be supported by the recreational aspect. At least that was our vision of it, because the plant can be used for so much and can substitute so much of what, so many of the products, from plastics to fabrics and paper. And all of this, I'm sure, as well.
Some of it, yeah. I've heard they were also talking about using it for components in cars.
Oh, they do. They use it for automotive already. It's one of the largest applications of hemp is in the automotive industry, actually.
Yeah.
And hemp and just plastics and biofuels and batteries, and the list goes on and on.
So can I ask you, I want to dig into the and here I'm going to do another shameless slap here. Joseph Calderone, Grateful Valley Farm, here joining me tonight. And I want to dig into the CFA stuff because I've looked at some of these other it seems like every state has an organization sort of like this, and maybe New York has a couple, but I'm curious sort of how many members you guys have and what your big initiatives are. Because it seems like you're trying to, seems like strength in numbers maybe would help in a state like New York, because it seems, in my opinion, to be a dumpster fire. But I always thought it would be that. It's New York, and it seems like it's always a shit show. But I'd love to know what you guys are fighting for, how many members you got, and the mission statement, all that shit.
Yeah, well, New Yorkers fight, right? I mean, I guess that's kind of like but we're farmers. Like, a lot of our members are farmers and cultivators from upstate, and some of us are a little bit somewhat divorced from what's happening down in the urban areas. And New York really is two states. It's urban, and then it's, there's a joke about Pennsylvania. They say that it's, it's Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with a lot of Alabama in between,
Yeah.
And I think that New York is a little bit like that too. But it's not to say that our farmers have rebel flags or anything like that. That's, no, not at all. We have, there are all our well, I'll just say a little. I'll just talk about our membership, and that's that we have around 80 um, paid members and paid members. Some people haven't yet paid, but they filled out our survey that they want to be part of our organization, so they're effectively part of our organization. And then we have all these other members that have attended our meetings and continue to attend our meetings, and fill out our surveys. So they're sort of like, let's say, non-paying members, or like just members who haven't, filled out a survey or paid yet. But when you add up all of those people that identify with the CFA, including our members, it ends up being around about between 150 and 160 people, or 160 farmers. But we also include mentors in the mentorship program from New York State, mentees, and also some legacy people as well. And some of those crossover, like some of those legacy people are, there again, I'm using the word legacy, the traditional market people. And so that's reliably, at least 30 to 40% of the AUCCs. There's about 200 of the farmers and growers in New York State. So there's 287 farmers and growers in New York State at the moment, and there'll be more than that or less, because a lot of our guys, unfortunately, probably won't make it. And there'll be new entrants with the new applications, which will be unfortunate. But we're doing everything that we can at Cannabis Farmers Alliance. So what we do is we advocate on behalf um, of farmers, cultivators, and even small businesses. So small businesses that share sort of our values as an organization, and our values are activism, education, um, and unity. And that's not on our website, but that's essentially what we are and what we do. And we're an activist organization first. We're a grassroots organization. We work with the Farm Bureau in New York State, which is one of the largest lobby groups in the United States, let alone New York State. And they represent all the farms, and have been really our main lobbyists, and they've been able to give memorandums of some support of many of our initiatives. Um, and there's a long list of those. Everything from well, right now our latest one is a relief fund, because based on our numbers, the New York market should have the state itself did an impact plan which projected New York State to be anywhere between 1.74 and 3.4 billion dollars in the first year. We took an average of that, which was 2.5, because we figured let's be a little fair, okay? And I think that's a fair assessment, that the market should be at least $2.5 billion, especially if you look at all of the traditional shops, like the sticker stores and everything, and how much they're doing and how much we've lost to them. So if you take the number 140 million, you that's represents um, about 8% of the market, I believe. So 92% of the market in year one has been unrealized. So
Although,
we're
although I gotta say, I watched some of this stuff in Vermont. I watched the consulting firms do these market projections, and to me, it kind of felt like they were just pulling numbers out of their ass. They don't know how much. It's a guess, and it's an educated guess at best. And from what I saw from some of these people, maybe it wasn't even that educated of a guess. Maybe they're good at math, but maybe they don't really know much about the cannabis industry, and they're just kind of grasping at straws. Is what it felt like from my watching of the advisory committee meetings here in Vermont, where they discussed the market analysis, Vicente Strategies, those guys.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, again, we're going on what the state reported, and it's true. It could have been it, even 2.5 billion could still be an overestimation. And maybe it was just noise, right? Maybe it was just public relations and hype, and it's possible, but I would
Well, it
say at least.
sounds like also sounds like also it sounds like also there was some licensing delays, which put a serious damper on that.
Right, exactly. But we can also go by what the medical groups did. And I mean, the general consensus of the medical groups is that their products weren't that great. Um, they did give relief to a lot of people, but a lot of the folks that went to the medical groups ended up looking on the traditional market for different products and different varieties, like more one-to-ones or mixed ratios, 5-to-2s or one-to-ones. And what I mean by 1-to-1 and 5-to-2, and that's the ratio between, let's say, one cannabinoid and another. So between like for instance, you might have 12% CBD and 4% THC, and that some some medicinal customers are looking for different kind of ratios, right? So but they made I was told uh by the vice president of government relations at a event at the Desmond, a Cannabis Business Insider event, one of Brad Racino's events, by an MSO, that they made $1.1 billion last year. And so my my estimation is that if they're telling me they made $1.1 billion as a medical, then it's okay for me to kind of keystone that up, up to two between 2 and 2.5 billion for for even um a guesstimate, right? And and especially given, like, you talk to Paula Collins, I think she had an amazing perspective on how many traditional shops there were, right? There were or sticker shops, the state says there's
Yeah.
1,500. She says there's 6,000 in New York City alone and about 32,000 statewide. And I think that she's closer to the truth than to OCM. So if you can imagine that ecosystem of sticker stores and how much they're pulling in, and then and project what that would have what project what that those would have made for the legal market.
Mm. And I liked her uh, talking points about maybe this transitional license, because with so many stores like that, like, yeah, wouldn't it be better to try to get these guys involved? If the state, from what I've seen, they care more about tax revenue than anything. So, maybe it would be wise to make it easier to enter the market. Um, I don't know. It seems very cost prohibitive, especially in the city. And well, it sounds like some of these guys also have locations already, which does seem like a big part of the problem. But um, I feel like if it was easier to get in, you would see more people signing up for this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a critical issue. I mean, and also the governor, I mean, the
Did I lose you?
only hello? Am I still there? Hello?
What? I can still hear you. It chopped up there for a second, but I think we're still good.
Okay, so the governor's office, it was interesting that her state of the state, she mentioned cannabis. The only thing she mentioned about cannabis was enforcement. So enforcing, sending out basically what I think, and this is me personally, not necessarily this Cannabis Farmers Alliance, but what I feel like is a mini war on drugs 2.0. And I think it's whack-a-mole, you know. Um, so you're gonna whack some of these stores, so they're gonna take out the beepers again, they're gonna do delivery again, and these guys have their own clientele, and if they go to illegal, it's also look, it's price, it's basic marketing. It's like it's price positioning, um, and potency in some ways, but let's just say, product, right? So
Mhm.
consumers are just gonna, if they go to a legal dispensary, and if the price points are too high, and if they're getting the same, or even if you got kind of, you're gonna have to entice them somehow. Maybe it's the wow effect of the store or something, or the brands that are in there. But um, you know, the stores are gonna have to do something in order to keep those customers and prevent them from going to their local neighborhood dealer that they've been dealing with for many years,
Mm.
or
And it
growing their own.
yeah, and it does seem like the taxes are kind of just a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
ridiculous, in my opinion.
Yeah, and so anyway, at CFA, actually there's a lot of stakeholders that I think are in favor of enforcement. And it makes sense in a way, because they won't have to compete with these stores that are, you know, it's ridiculous. I mean, I think I talked to one dispensary in the Lower East Side. He told me that they were, I think, eh, eh, 60 stores within a half a mile of his, or even less than that, because the city's so, everything is so concentrated there, that so 60 stores within, I think he said within 10 blocks
So
of his.
yeah, that's a
And
lot.
so
That's a lot of competition. Yeah.
right, exactly. So, and so it's understandable that they would want to have enforcement, but the irony is that some of these guys were just as involved, and they're okay with the same guys that were putting them away to go harass and to close down these other stores, which I think is another just irony of this industry.
Mm.
I don't know. I'm diplomatic here. I don't really have an answer for that, but it just seems ironic to me, let's say.
I don't like that. I'll say it.
And
Yo,
and the other issue is that these guys that are opening these retail shops, I don't know if you saw Aaron Camp's interview on Cannabis Business Insider in the last couple days. He owns Dank in Buffalo, and he didn't mince any words about it. He didn't mention any names, but he said that a lot of these retail guys that are going to open up are going to fail, and the reason why is because of the consultants that are
Oh,
misdirecting them.
I did see that. I believe. Did you say Wester Camp? Is that?
Aaron, I think it was Aaron Van Camp of Dank in Buffalo.
Yeah,
He talked
yeah.
about how he made $5 million, and he talked about, I think, how he did it with $100,000 and some elbow grease, and he thinks a lot of these retail guys that are being and I agree with him, that are being advised by these quote unquote consultants are setting themselves up for failure because they're lining up with some, really expensive security firms and design firms, and you know, are they going to are they going to be able to last? Are they going to? I agree with them. I think a lot of them are going to fail,
I
unfortunately.
believe I dropped a comment on that to the effect of like so many consultants I've seen don't really seem to know much about the cannabis industry. Maybe they have experience consulting in other fields, but it does kind of feel like this is a different ball game.
Mhm.
When your
Yeah,
product
and
when you
there's one, yeah, exactly. And I think there's one group in particular, and I'm not, like, again, I'm not going to mention names, that is driving a lot of that, and they were also, unfortunately, they were also driving a lot of the policy and the crafting of the legislation, and they were also the closest the um to the OCM in terms of the communication that they had and influence that they had on the OCM. And again, some of it is not the OCM's fault because they were ignorant. They were sort of like blank slates. But what happens if you're a blank slate and you're filled with garbage? I mean, it's like, I don't know what to.
Well, I was going to ask you about the Cannabis Association of New York, but I don't know if that's a bad question now. We could skip that one.
Let's just say I've never been a member. I've attended some of their meetings. I know
Oh, broke up
a
there
lot of
for a
their
minute.
members. Their leadership has just changed. I think I may have frozen here. Did you see
Yeah,
me?
you froze for like 5 seconds there.
I've seen myself frozen, but if I'm not frozen on your end, then I'm okay.
Well, the audio's still working. The video is frozen.
Oh, okay, there we
There,
go. So the laughter must have done something, or the
there.
mention. Yeah, there was like a wrinkle in time, or the space time continuum was like sort of ruptured. When with our laughter. Um, well, that could be another show altogether. And I'm going to reserve, like, all of my opinions on that, but I'm hoping that we can all work together as organizations, and that's like the diplomatic answer. But let's just say that I personally don't feel that organization um uh helped out the farmers in any way, shape, or form. And I think they helped out maybe certain farmers, maybe certain members of their organizations, but it was clear that on the policy side, I'd mentioned that meeting where it was essentially a processor dominated meeting, and I was like, as soon as that meeting ended, I was like, I said, as farmers and cultivators, most of us are getting screwed here, and we have to do something about it, which is one of the reasons. And in a way, it was a good thing. It was a good thing because CFA was born out of this vacuum that was created because of our needs that weren't being met by other trade organizations. So I would say, uh, there's always an opportunity in conflict, and that's what arose, and that's where we are now. And now we're in a better position because we actually are doing our own. We for the first uh so we really formed at the lake, in around March of this year, and so we've gotten a lot of press and we've gotten a lot of traction. Um, and we did all of our we did all of our legislation and activism on our own. And but and but now we have an attorney, and we also have a lobbyist, and we have a PR firm. So all of our PR and activism, and that's just full disclosure. So we have representation because of all the hard work that we've done, and someone actually believes in us. I'm actually going to plug our attorney and lobbying firm, and I think he's someone that you might want to consider having on. His name's Matt Leonardo from Hinman Straub, and I think that you'll find it'll be a very interesting conversation. He's got a very interesting perspective on the industry.
Love to. Yeah, please
And
send him over.
I will. I totally will. And so, but in terms of where we're at right now, we had a stakeholder meeting today with the Retailers Association, with the Processors Association, with the and actually with a couple of ROs were there. We'll see how that crystallizes and how we can maybe try to reform this industry. But we're really concerned now about our micro businesses, because a lot of our members are transitioning to micro businesses because it's the only way that they can have any control over the retail and over their own supply chain.
Can you tell us what a micro business is, or what it's defined as in New York?
Sure. A micro business is a fully integrated business that can do grow, processing, and retail, and also delivery at the moment, as long as they have a retail location. They can grow as much as they want, uh, given the like for instance, we can do 5,000 outdoor and 2,005. Grateful Valley Farm personally can do 2,500 indoor. And the idea, or mixed light, actually. The idea is that with the mixed light, you can, get about 2 to 4 um, harvests from your canopy. And then with the outdoor, you can do some biomass, or try doing some regenerative farming. So there's, the problem, and there's a lot of, I think, problems that need to be reformed for microbusiness. They should, I mean, any business should be able to move from one modality to the next, whether it's indoor, outdoor, or mixed light, given the economic circumstances or given the market, right? We shouldn't be just and the other is that we're allowed to buy 500 pounds of so we can grow as much as we want. If our crop fails, we can get up to 1,700 pounds of flour, if we can prove that we have crop failure. And then on top of that, we can buy 500 pounds of biomass. But we cannot sell each other's products. Um, our retail has to be 25 miles from our grow location, which in rural New York State is an impossibility. That has to change because um, there are many municipalities that opted out of cannabis. So uh, uh, there's a lot of farms that barely reach, a town in 25 miles in order to put a retail location. So we can do special events, which is good. Um, but so there's a lot of reforms that we're going to try to propose as CFA in this next legislative period. But one thing that we're also in this and that we want to do, and that um uh goes back to the numbers that we were talking about, the billions, is that we're looking at some relief, um at some non-cash relief and some cash relief from the state. And we're looking at anywhere, you know um you know uh, we looked at the losses of the market, and the actual losses of what the potential projected market would have been somewhere between $1 and $4 million per farm. That's a lot, right? And we're never going to get that, right? We're never going to get that in cash. I mean, no one has any illusions that we're going to get that, um, but we're looking at somewhere between 300 million and a billion, and that might be composed of a combination of tax credits and maybe just some reforms and some relief, which will help make us whole, so that we can try to make it in the next couple of years. Given the fact that 92, in our opinion, 92% of the market was unrealized. So that's what we're advocating on behalf of, for our farmers and for our cultivators, is strengthening the micro business ability to succeed, but also for our cultivators to be able to maybe increase their canopy if they have to, or maybe relieve them of some of their fees and other things. And I actually think this is kind of a first. Um, in the United States, in the cannabis industry, if I may be so bold to say, is a trade organization that is advocating this strongly on behalf of their growers and their farmers. So and the reason for that is because of grassroots. It's because you read some of those stories, how heart-wrenchingly heartbreaking those stories were. Some of our members were suicidal, and that's not an exaggeration. Um, you know, they're they put they were distressed as regular farmers. They got more distressed as hemp farmers, and even more distressed as conditional cultivators. I know that there's some of us libertarian minded folks, kind of like myself also, that say, well, that's just creative destruction, right? There's just um that that the strong will survive, but not when the industry is constructed in a way to accelerate your demise. I mean, if it was a fair market from the beginning, then that makes sense.
Where's
But
my
it
bell? Ding, ding, ding. Like, yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more, Joseph. Yeah.
so
Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, I welcome the interruption, and
great
I
point.
so yeah, and we saw this with Grateful Valley Farm. We were a small microcosm of, and all of us, all farmers, farmers are. I was never a legacy grower. I was sort of the reluctant cannabis activist and the reluctant cannabis industry entrant. Like I was mentored in 2012 with one of the first integrated operations in Boulder, Colorado. They ended up selling off their dispensary to Native Roots. It was called the Dandelion, and then they sold off their grow, and they focused specifically in processing. So I come from a processing, medical compliance perspective, and then I actually came back into the farming and growing with my relationship with Grateful Valley Farm and with all these farmers. So I know how the other guys think from the medical standpoint. I can look and see where we stand with respect to medical, and, like, let's say the stacked farms and the processors, right? So I actually have the perspective for our farmers. I'm not saying I'm the only one, or that I'm some genius or something that understands the differences, but I know what I understand about farmers is they just want to do their jobs. They want to go great cannabis. They want to innovate and use, like, you know uh uh different types of uh integrative pest management. They want to find natural ways to do that. They want uh they just want to grow and sell great stuff at the market, at a farmer's market, or at dispensaries, and they want to be left alone, but they can't. I mean, we couldn't be isolated, and we realized that we couldn't just sit back on our farms and allow this rug to just get to be rug pulled by this industry. And it was amazing, once just a few of us started voicing our opinions, what a magnet we became for others. And I tell you what, I hope it happens in other states. I hope the farmers get together in all these states, because, and I hope also, and I know this seems a little pie in the sky and a little bit political, but I hope we're an example for all the other farmers, that they do have potentially a farmer's holiday, that they understand that there's a radical nature to farming. They are innovative, they are independent, um, they understand nature and their connection to the earth. Most of them, I'm not talking about all the monocropping farms, are regenerative in nature and understand the balance between the land and the human being.
Hmm.
And that's really also feeds into the sort of ethnobotanical and historical nature of the humans' interplay and their interaction with plants, whether it's corn, whether it's the apple, whether it is cannabis, whether it's ayahuasca or ibogaine or psilocybin or whatever it is. So, you know, um, don't piss off farmers, because eventually they're going to have a holiday. They are. They're going to have a holiday, and the urban areas may understand the supply chain. they might actually, and if anything, also, like I said, I'd like the cannabis farmers to be an example for the other farms, that there's power in the farms getting together and saying, "Do you want your food? Do you want it clean? Do you you know,
Fuck yeah.
do you want where do where do you want your cannabis from? Do you wanna know where it comes from? I don't know. Maybe."
I do. Yeah.
So
I'm
so
getting towards the end of my stuff. Oh,
Mhm.
go ahead. Finish that off if you like.
No, it's okay. Please go ahead, because I was just, I was on my soapbox.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm getting towards the end, so I'm gonna do another shameless slap. Joseph Calderone, Grateful Valley Farms, Cannabis Farmers Alliance. Uh, Fascinating stuff, Joseph. One of the last couple things I wanted to ask you was, it sounded like maybe you were having some trouble communicating with the state, or maybe they weren't getting back to you. I don't know. I've talked to a bunch of people about this in Vermont that have had a tough time, and I'm gonna solo on you so I can go pack my.
Oh,
But I'd be curious to hear what it's been like interacting with the regulatory agencies and maybe some of your local legislators.
so our local legislators are mainly not cannabis friendly. So I live in Chemung County, and Steuben County is the adjacent county. The county to the north is Schuyler. We live in the southern tier, and work in the southern tier of New York. Many of our municipalities opted out of cannabis. So uh, our state senator helped set up the hemp bill, which led to the hemp pilot program, which eventually led to adult use cannabis. So, but he stopped short after hemp. So I would say in our region isn't cannabis friendly, because there's um, it's just it's a tale of two states. You know, you have the urban blue areas, and then you have the rural kind of red areas. But that's not to say a lot of them haven't evolved. And that's not to say that they don't understand the plight of the farmers, because typically they have been the legislators have supported farms. And to that effect, we actually there's going to a bill there's going to be a bill in the next legislative session, which uh will try to get cannabis classified as an agricultural crop in New York State. And that would open us up to potentially more grants and more interaction with ag and markets. And I believe it should be an agricultural crop. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to raise my hand because I watched this same debate go down in Vermont
Hmm.
about whether it's an agricultural crop, which seems to really be the only justification for that whole debate seems to be around the federal illegality of it. Because
Yeah.
it seems like under the definition of what agriculture is in the state of Vermont by our own statute, that it fits pretty squarely into agriculture, like growing Christmas trees is agriculture. Okay, what's the difference between that and growing a weed plant, or growing tomatoes? To me, it seems pretty clear to be agriculture. And it was weird watching real politicians sort of debate that.
Yeah. It's kind of incredible actually how, how, and I'll get to the OCM question as well too. And then it's actually kind of incredible to watch how regulatory agencies come up with their definitions of what, like for instance, extraction, okay? New York State is telling us that agitation with a universal solvent of water, which separates trichomes, it's a separation, mechanical separation technology, as the same as applying BHO or ethanol to a plant, or CO2 extraction, and that they should all fall under the same um, uh, GMP regulation. I mean, one people have been agitating products with water for millennia. So, I mean, and the farmers could very easily do their own hash, very easily. They could very easily do their own bubble hash, and they could very easily do their live rosins um, through mechanical and agitation. I mean, that those two extraction methods should not be coupled with chemical extraction. And that's just one example of
I agree.
how a
I'm
regular
with you. Yeah.
and how a regular of how regulation can kind of, and of course also that's also by design, because processors want to control, and medical groups want to control as much as they can those value added products, um that, that they can. And again, that's not helpful to farmers. So that's another area where we're trying to push for changes and reforms in the legislation, is to claw some of that back. And micro businesses are going to be able to do that anyway, because they're good. But under what type of regulatory regime? How onerous are those regulations are going to be in order to process those things? Are they, as a smaller footprint, as a smaller business, going to be able to have enough money to be able to become certified like these other larger groups? So that's a question for legislation. And in terms of like communication with the OCM, we've had meetings with them
Deep breath. Yeah.
prior to prior to actually having an attorney and having a lobbyist. And we felt like we were never listened to, because we had so many incredible suggestions from our farmers, even on these cannabis growers showcases, which really never ended up helping 90% of our farmers. They helped out cards, and they helped out processors more than anyone. And again, the top 7 or 8 people that are dominating the adult use market right now, aside from the multi-state operators. So we had so many suggestions, and they were either thwarted because we weren't respected as a group or listened to as a group. Some of it maybe had to do with timing, but it's also because in some ways I also don't. I know that there's definitely some people with really good intentions at the OCM. I know that there are. I also know that there's people that bask in the limelight of the sexiness of cannabis, and they don't really understand it. They and then for sure there are some people that are just swayed by the political machinations of Albany and that kind of influence. And it would have been great if the board was composed of some some cannabis activists, or some cannabis, or even the advisory board, if they were listened to by some cannabis activists, or some traditional market people as well. Maybe it will, maybe there'll be reform, maybe they'll expand the board, maybe they'll see this and understand that. Um, but yes, the communication, and I think that you'll find that from anybody in this industry, unless you have a lobbyist that's basically, sitting on the laps of the different members of the government agencies. It's very difficult very difficult to get a phone call or an email from somebody.
Damn. That must be frustrating when you're trying to open a business and you're spending all this money trying to get operational.
Yeah, and also the thing is what's also absurd and also just amazing about this plant and about this industry is that this plant has evolved and survived millennia of human manipulation. It's, from its origins and, in the Russian steppes as an autoflower and a small shrub and plant, to, evolving to all the different hybridized crosses and different thousands of varieties, from food to fiber to medicine to recreation and relief. You know, it's done a good job surviving. I mean, with the Controlled Substances Act, it's the plant said, "All right, you're going to try to eradicate us. We're going to go indoors and we're going to become stronger under a smaller footprint with lights, and we're going to get fed nutrients so that we become, we're so that we express more THC per square foot than we did before, right?" So, um, the plant won't remember us, and it'll be here long after we're gone. And I said at my first CCB meeting when I stood up there, I said, all this fuss over this plant, the plant's going to do what it's going to do, and it's going to survive with or without our regulations or our control.
Yeah. Um, I got a couple more. I want to do this one real quick because a term you mentioned to me on the phone was greenwashing, and that's backpedaling a bit here. But I was curious to hear your thoughts on that because I've certainly seen that in a number of industries with this. I don't know, maybe the electric car industry where they're doing all these mining operations, and maybe it's not as clean as they say. But I've, in terms of how that pertains to the cannabis industry, I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts on that are.
Would you mean greenwashing as in the environmental greenwashing of the
Well,
industry?
I
Or
think,
just in general, that concept of sort of projecting something that you're doing that when you're actually not?
well, you want me to read the quote you said on the phone?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
We want to diminish our carbon footprint, but they're doing it in Africa and places with poor people.
Okay, alright. So
Maybe that wasn't specific to the cannabis industry, but I
no,
feel
it
like,
is. It is because what again, I guess the plant's gonna do what it's gonna wanna do, with the help of, with a lot of money, and I think what that refers to is that, the we drive if we drive an electric car, they're kind of amazing, and on the face of it, there's no carbon, right, that's created or emitted. At least we think there's not when we're driving it, but then we don't take into account the amount of energy that it costs to produce the car. We don't take into account the amount of electricity that it costs to charge the vehicle and what that takes off the grid, or how much more pressure that puts on the grid in order to produce power. And if we have that capacity, do we have to supplement that capacity with coal burning plants or ones that we shut down? Are we diverting energy from other sources to be able to do that? Do we not have the infrastructure? The rare earth minerals that we have, where are they coming from? Are they coming from home, or are they coming from areas in Africa where children are breathing in all the particulate in order and massive destruction of the earth, and in order to get these rare earth metals, minerals into components that help function, that push these cars. um and then of course there's the disposal of these batteries. So I guess I'm just saying that because i I actually love the idea of electric, but I'm also willing to ask the hard questions about how they get there. And in terms of cannabis, one of the main objectives of the MRTA, which is the law that created legal cannabis in New York State, was social equity, which I think is a great idea, but the rollout of it is obviously different than the idea. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? The second objective um is a sustainable, environmentally sustainable program. Okay. Well, how are you going to have an environmentally sustainable program? The plant itself is a remediator, right, of heavy metals. It's also regenerative for the soil. um it 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 has CO2 capture. um it again, it can be used as if you burn it, you can use it as biochar. There's many different uh ways that it is that it can provide more for the environment, and at least help with environmental sustainability. um but this New York industry is actually constructed to prevent that from happening. It is driving the plant indoors, and it's driving the plant into mixed light and indoor, which are very capital and energy intensive, as opposed to outdoor. Now, our growing season in New York is somewhat like Vermont's. We have a very we don't have the growing season or the microclimates that they have in certain areas like Colorado and in California or New Mexico, or wherever. That's for sure. But we do have a ton of water, and we have precedent for being able to grow outdoors, uh, and we're being told, the industry is being told, well, people want indoor weed, they want indoor cannabis, they want those tight nugs, uh, they don't want any kind of larfy nugs, but it would take a while, but there are regenerative answers. There's
I
uh
like smoking outdoor. I'll say it. I'm an
right.
outdoor fan. That's what I grew up on, and I love that shit. And I
Yeah,
think, yeah,
and actually that's also something that our California brothers and sisters, the ones up in Humboldt, that's actually something that they were just at the Niagara Community College. There was an event there, and there were a few people from California talking about how we all have to stick together, and they're creating like I think a 200,000 square foot nursery out in Buffalo. Um, and they were talking about live soil and regenerative aspects and integrative pest management, and it's possible. People have been doing it. People doing it. My point is, and actually, to Senator Hinchy's credit, when we were testifying in front of the Senate in September, she was also worried about the same issue. Like, what happened to the environmental sustainable aspect of, if we take away outdoor, then where is it? Are you going to just, are all of our mixed light and all of our indoor uh um grows, are they going to buy carbon credits to make up for their carbon footprint? Is that the way? Is that the solution? Um, are they gonna plug in? Are they gonna have renewable resources? Are they gonna have solar and wind, and how reliable is that? Right. So
well, and the carbon credit program is a whole other fucking can of worms.
right, I know, and that's, we could get into that for a couple hours. Try telling an indigenous person down in the Amazon, you know, try to explain the carbon credit regime to them. When someone's sawing down their, like, their 600-year-old or 1,000-year-old trees, or is trying to, extract, emeralds and gold and oil from or to strip down the land for their cattle.
I'm
Talk
glad you
to them.
circled. I'm glad you circled back to that stuff about the mineral rights and exploiting extracted. Yeah, that was way back in the notes, but I'm glad you touched on that for a second.
Look,
Straight up.
what's happened to the indigenous people around the world and in the United States. Um, it wasn't Leonard Peltier, it was, oh god, I'm blanking on his name, but, Russell Means was I think he was an Oglala Sioux. He died not too long ago, but he was an activist, and I believed he was part of the AIM. He was part of AIM and, sort of the Native American, revolt, out in, South Dakota, where the FBI got involved. Um, and, they, he said before he died that, he used the reservation as a microcosm. He said, it's federal food, it's federal buildings, um, and it's removed us from the land. It's removed us. They got rid of the buffalo, and he projected kind of a future for the rest of us. He goes, don't think that what they're not doing to the indigenous people, they're going to try to do to everybody else. We're just R&D, for the rest of you, and you'll find that out, you know. So and I learned a lot from my work with the indigenous groups down in the Amazon. As I said before, the main thing that I learned was that you'll be surprised where your resources can come from. They don't necessarily have to come from money. It's people's voices, people coming together, not being distracted, and having a singular focus, and or having the right values aligned and the right objectives. And then it's amazing what you'll attract by doing that, and I believe that's what we did with CFA. And I think that, I hope we could be potentially an example to other people in cannabis, and then maybe even other farmers as well.
Well, tonight I've attracted Joseph Calderone, Grateful Valley Farms. Uh, I got a guy I'd like to ask you about real quick. Stephen Houghton. He's coming on the show in a couple months. Maybe he's a member of your organization, it sounded like.
Oh, Steve Halton, yeah, great. Oh my gosh, today I just talked to him today. Real Life Botanicals. Steve is an OG. Like he was a hay farmer, and he was a legacy guy. Uh, and he his first passion, even before getting into legal cannabis, was hemp decortication and hemp as food, and and hemp based products for animals, for humans. And I was just down at his farm today, believe it or not. And he's got an amazing facility down there, and he's got an incredible uh, variety of called Topanga, which has 3% terpenes in it, and it's beautiful outdoor. And I wish him all the luck to get that onto the market. I hope a lot of dispensaries look into that. It's beautiful flower what he's done, and he's done a lot of great stuff with outdoor. But he'll have a lot more to say than I will, because he's definitely he's someone who's been entrenched and ensconced in this industry for a while. And he's also, I mean, I hope I'm not real. I don't think I'm talking out of turn here. He's struggling like the rest of us, and he's been here forever. So I look forward to looking at, and then everybody tune into that, because that's going to be a really amazing conversation. And there's other people on our board. I would love to share with you some other, some other our folks that
Please.
are part of our membership.
You're more than welcome to send them over. And where's Steven? I thought I had the date for that one. Steven, I don't know. I'll have to find out later. He is coming on the show. I know. Stephen Houghton, January 25th. That's coming right up here in 2 weeks from today. He'll be on the show, so that'll be a good one.
That's going to be amazing, because he really knows where the bodies are buried. He's been in here from right from the beginning. He knows the skeletons hanging in the closet. I don't think he's going to reveal all of them.
We'll find out. You never know. Sometimes, sometimes I get it right out of him.
If anyone can pull it out, you can.
Word up, Joseph. I got one question left for you that I like to ask everybody, that I think is a fun question. And that question is, if you could rewrite the legislation in New York and the rules and regulations, what would you change? What would you throw away? And what would you keep, maybe, that you think is a good idea?
I always said that the law was a great idea. I mean, I thought that environmental sustainability, and I would keep the social equity portion. I mean, a lot of people would disagree with me, especially more of the sort of like radical free market people would maybe disagree with me. But I believe that some of the wrongs of the past need to be righted, and that there's a possibility of doing that through the law, and by setting up parameters that help um, prop up certain people that were disadvantaged because of the war on drugs, or because um, of their life circumstances. So I don't think I would change anything about only thing I would change about the social equity is they opened themselves up to these lawsuits. So I would have had them codify all these cards early on in the original law. That's one thing that I would have changed, that would have helped everybody. What else? I would have very much slow walked the regulations for the growers, and actually for the processors as well. I would have slow walked all the regulations. I would have I would have allowed at least 2 to 3 years of all of the stakeholders to become compliant, um, because the regulations are just so onerous. And well, then of course I would have included a lot more legacy, traditional people from the industry, um, and on the conversation early on. Um, those are all different um solution, and those are all things that I think I would have done differently. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. I just like to hear what people say. I think it's a fun question to ask people, and I'm always interested to hear the different changes people were made, and the stuff they'd keep the same, especially because it seems like a lot of people would change mostly everything. So yeah. What's
Well, I mean, it's easy to say we should start, we should scrap the whole program and open back up again. But I honestly believe that there's still some good in in what the MRTA created. It's been the execution, and it's been you know money, and lawfare really does work in certain places. Using the law like like a chessboard, or like weapons in battle. That's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, lawfare is, if you have lawfare on your side, then you're in a good position, especially in states that are more litigious than others. So,
Mm. What's the best book you got behind you, Joseph? What you reading right now?
oh my gosh, some of these are my dad's book too, but I don't know. Land of the Firebird is pretty good. That's a book sort of about Russia. And then there's there's the fishing encyclopedia. I like to do some fishing.
Hell yeah.
Reagan Land is pretty good because that's sort of about the Reagan Revolution, and then there's kind of a long wall of books on Vietnam. But I'm kind of I could have my own library. Someone could have a library card, and I could. This is just a small percentage of what I got. But and the thing is I want to apologize about my intro to this I kind of blanked out on my description. I had a lot of difficulty. I have difficulty talking about myself until I get comfortable. So uh but as you can see, I can be loquacious is the term.
Look, we did an hour and 40 here. I got you open right up.
I know, and actually, I I'd love to look forward to some other time. Maybe even like it was with another guest or something, if you're interested, because
Yeah, send me your people. I'd love to talk to some processors over there in New York. That would be cool if you know any of them. But I'm definitely interested in connecting with some members of your organization and hearing what they have to say. And I'm sure
there's some
Steven's
there's
going to be a
yeah, there's some great processors. I'll send you over some names, but you know there's a Veterans Hemp, which I really like. This Jason Ambrosino, and I'm not even sure if he'll come on, but he's got a very interesting perspective on the industry, and he's doing well. So, and there's other like Baked by Jenny and some others, but I'll send over some names. And um but
there for a
there's
second.
there,
Oh, there we go. Sorry, froze up there for a second.
yeah, there's a lot to choose from. What's amazing though is that I think you're already noticing it. There's a lot of characters in this industry. There's a
Yeah.
lot of there's a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. We got nurses, doctors, pharmacists, farmers. They're coming from
Cops.
everywhere. Cops, yeah, cops, yeah. We got cops owning huge like grows out in California. That's amazing.
Pardon me. Almost choked there.
That's
Yeah.
another irony of the industry, right?
I don't love that irony. That's it,
No,
but
no. I know. I understand.
so Joseph, I'm out of shit here. I'm gonna do one more shameless slap. Joseph Calderone, Grateful Valley Farm, Cannabis Farmers Alliance. I'm gonna pull myself back up and I'm gonna just put this down. Boom. Thank you so much for being here. I always leave a little space at the end for the guests if we missed anything or if there's any shameless plugs or shout outs that you want to give. Now would be the time. Thanks so much. This has been super insightful. And I really do hope we can follow up on this down the line and see how you're making out, man. Thanks for your time. And the last word is yours, man.
I'm just going to say there's going to be a lot of stuff. There's going to be the legislative session coming up. We're going to be doing a lot of lobbying. We're going to be down in Albany. I'll keep you informed of that. Maybe I'll just let you know how things progress. Thank you for putting me under the microscope. I actually I put that up there beforehand because I wanted you to see it. I'm being totally honest. So it's staged. but I just came up with that joke right now.
I didn't notice it the whole time. It's
Okay.
kind of
So I no, thank you so much, Caleb, and I wish you the best of luck with the show. It's really needed. I like this long form. It's you know, how lucky are we that we can have these channels like LinkedIn where we can kind of get to know one another and meet one another and establish a rapport and then eventually have like long form. I love these long form interviews and yeah, I wish you enormous success with this. I think you're on the right track and I enjoyed everything that I've listened to so far. They've been so informative.
flattery will get you everywhere, Joseph.
Oh yeah, and remember that clove oil and that cotton ball.
Yeah. I think I'm in for a root canal. That's a different story for another day. One more shameless slap. Joseph Calderone, Grateful Valley Farm, Cannabis Farmers Alliance. I'm going to sign it off. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey. Remember, the devil's in the details, and the details are in the